in Baltimore, and many of you were as well based on my timeline. But this is why we love Luke Jones, because we dispatched him. I was watching the game on my mobile feed. Luke was actually at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, where Manny Machado, and I have seen the highlights, was the hero finally. And Lord knows, Luke, I don't want to say we've bashed Manny Machado, because I don't even think that's even been the issue. I have been talking trading Manny Machado, and I know Ken Rosenthal did the same thing out of Fox Sports earlier in the week as well about breaking the team up. But at least for one night, there were some shades of the old Manny Machado, correct?
There was. And actually, if you go and look at his June stats, he's hitting over 300 in the month of June. The OPS of 976, slugging 643, he's hit 5 home runs, 4 doubles.
Normalizing, right, for him,
yeah,
right?
Exactly. And you don't see it overnight because, well, when you're hitting 205 at the end of May, your average isn't going to just normalize overnight. It's going to take some time. And
227 sucks, but it is up 25 points.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's much better than it was 3 weeks ago. So we knew that was going to happen. It doesn't mean he's out of the woods. Doesn't mean he won't revert to some bad habits. And it's not as though he's been perfect in the month of June, but certainly
wasn't even perfect running the bases on Tuesday night, right?
Yeah. I mean, that whole, I've almost come to the resignation with that unless you want to bench him, I know Buck Showalter has addressed it, and Manny's Manny. I mean, I don't like it. I know a lot of people don't like it, but you take the good with the bad if you want to bench him. And
I remember that Manny being Manny in Cleveland and in Boston. I think all fans there would remember the other Manny with all-world, best-on-the-planet potential, who, runs sometimes and jogs sometimes, right?
Yeah, and it's something you wish you wouldn't do, but you take all the good with that bad, and certainly a big performance for him, a huge 3-run homer to tie the game, and just a nice win for the Orioles. And even though they extended their streak of giving up 5 or more runs to 17 games now, 3 shy of the Major League record, if you're looking for a silver lining, they only gave up 5, which 12 of these 17 games over the stretch, they've given up more than 5. If you give up 5, it's not good. It's still a bad pitching performance, but your offense then only has to score 6 to win as opposed to scoring 9 or 10 or 12. That's more possible. It's something that's a little more reasonable. It's still not good, but
not on a nightly basis. I mean, they're going to hit themselves out of stuff, but they're not going to hit themselves out of 8, 9, and 10 run nights every night. That's
right. Yeah, I mean, it's not the formula. It's not ideal, but if you're asking if this offense can score 5 or 6 runs on a given night, I'll like their chances against some, at least some pitchers, and certainly they did a nice job. But you really credit the bullpen after Chris Tillman exited. And what was a very frustrating outing for him, and we'll get into that. But bullpen, including some unlikely characters, one of them being Miguel Castro, doing a really nice job for Buck Showalter. And he's been waiting, and we've talked about this, and he's hoping to see one of these individuals at least, 1 or 2. We've seen Alec Asher at times look good out of the pen. Richard Blyers had his moments. And Miguel Castro certainly had a big moment getting out of that bases-loaded jam in the 7th inning. At some point, you have to have some other individuals provide some contributions, and so it was nice to see that out of the bullpen, even though they did go to Givens and Brock over the 8th and 9th.
He is Luke Jones. He is at Oriole Park at Camden Yards as this homestand is winding down against the Tribe. And, before we get into the individual play of this, they really do kind of hold their own at home, right? Like, even on their worst nights. And, look, they were absolutely obliterated and embarrassed on Monday night. And I think all of us wondered how they would respond to that. Tuesday was a little Oriole Magic kind of a response. They're better at home, but, don't look up. In 48 hours, they're back in an airplane again.
Right. I mean, they've won 2/3 of their games at home. They've lost 2/3 of their games on the road. I mean, it's as Jekyll and Hyde as it gets. And look, it's no big mystery that most teams in baseball, or any sport for that matter, play better at home than they do on the road. But when you have something this extreme, it really makes you scratch their head. But I mean, I kind of figured they would come home and start playing a little bit better at the very least. I mean, they couldn't get much worse than they've been on the road over the last 5 or 6 weeks. So certainly it helped playing the Cardinals, who aren't exactly playing good baseball, but nice to see them bounce back. As you pointed out, absolutely battered on Monday night, and they come back Tuesday night, and despite another poor start from an Orioles pitcher, everything else about the team pretty darn good besides that, and that's why they were able to overcome it.
Let's talk about Tillman a little bit here because, pitching is where we're going to go, and this record that keeps getting extended now that feels like some fans are kind of titillated by it. They're like, let's set the whole record. Let's go another week, giving up a dozen runs every night. But, Tillman, we look down, and I don't want to say that, not very good and the struggle and all that stuff, but when you make it through 4 innings and only give up 5 runs around here, it's, it's sort of a par night, but it's a night where you say, well, maybe they'll win if they score 6 or 7, and they did.
Yeah, Chris Tillman was not good. And we talked about this in his outing in Chicago. As much as the final line wasn't that impressive, there were some things about his last start that I was kind of encouraged by. First pitch strikes 75% of the time. Fastball usage was up. Velocity wasn't tremendous, but it was decent. I thought his stuff overall had looked a little more crisp than we've seen for the most part. So I was curious to see, okay, what does he do in his next start? And unfortunately, we didn't see any of those things. Wasn't really getting ahead of hitters. Mechanics were kind of all over the place again. I asked him about his arm slot, whether he's had to make an adjustment to try to keep his shoulder healthy. He denies that. He says he feels good, but the performance just isn't there. And he even acknowledged that probably was fortunate a few balls that his defense either made a good play on or was hit right at a fielder, that it could have been a lot worse. I think we're getting to a point here where this is getting close to the Orioles having to make a decision, whether it's him going to the DL, whether it's him going to the bullpen.
But I don't know who replaces him. I guess that's the hardest part, right? The guy's got 8.5 ERA. He's clearly not right. We almost feel sorry for him to some degree.
I do. Yeah, I absolutely do feel sorry for him because this isn't someone who just wakes up one day and says, I'm going to try to pitch completely differently. It's clear that he's either hurt or he's had to adjust his mechanics, his arm slot, to prevent himself, to prevent his shoulder from hurting, or he's just from a strength standpoint, whatever's going on with the shoulder, he just can't do the things that he did in the past. It's just...
when you're in your walk year, too, there's such an incredible pressure to go out there and try to go earn that whatever money you're going to get. And, there does come a point, though, where you're like, he's not helping himself. He's hurting himself right now.
Right. And to the
maybe physically, too.
Right. To the point that you just made, I totally agree that you kind of look at the other options, and are there other guys at the minor league level? There's Chris Lee, there's Jason Aquino, who Aquino's coming off of a really good start actually. But if Tillman had a 5 ERA, you would just keep trotting him out there. But the ERA is almost 8.5. At some point here, Buck did confirm he'll make his next start, but Buck didn't sugarcoat it. He kind of acknowledged Chris knows that he's not giving us what we need and what he's capable of doing. And he basically alluded to the fact that time is running short in that regard. And I don't think they're just going to DFA him or anything like that, but it gets to a point where you start to wonder, all right, are you really healthy, or are you going to stick him at the back of the bullpen like they did with Ubaldo for a few weeks? It's tough, and I do feel for him because you're talking about a guy who's been as much as we have lamented or belabored the point that he's not a true ace, he's been a really good top half of a rotation guy that would have been that for most teams out there. At least a number 3 starter, number 2 starter on a lot of clubs, a lot of good clubs, and that should be pretty valuable. That should be the kind of profile that fetches you a lot of money on the open market, and he's not going to get that now. Best he can probably hope for, barring a dramatic turnaround here in 2017, is a 1-year kind of pillow contract to try to reestablish some value, whether that comes with the Orioles or another team. But it's difficult to watch. You can just see how often he's missing arm side with his fastball. On Tuesday, he wasn't commanding any of his secondary pitches either. He tried to go fastball. When he tried to throw his secondaries, I think he only threw 8 or 9 sliders the entire night. I mean, that was a pitch that was huge for him last year before the shoulder creeped up. So
3 walks, 8 hits, 11 base runners, four innings. I mean, no strikeouts. Gave up a bomb. I mean, didn't make it to 100 pitches. I mean, it
was bad. I mean, 3 swings and misses. I mean, that right there. And look, I know there are a lot of people in this day and age we're so obsessed with velocity and strikeouts, and I'm not saying that's everything, but when you're incapable of missing bats, you know what that means? You get to 2 strikes on hitters and you can't put them away. And guys put the ball in play, or they extend the pitch count, or
guys hit 300 off of you in that circumstance.
Yeah, I mean, it's just
big leaguers do, right?
It's really difficult to pitch like that in this day and age. In this day and age of more hitters trying to hit home runs, and pitchers are trying to miss bats. And what Chris Tillman is profiling as right now, it's just not going to get done. I mean, his last start in Chicago, he struck some hitters out. It was actually, I believe, a season-high strikeouts for him. So you were hoping, even though the final results did not look all that impressive, but if you watched the start, you were hoping, okay, this looks a little bit more like Chris Tillman. But unfortunately, Tuesday night, we saw more like the guy that we saw in New York a couple weeks ago, and just someone who has struggled to even give the Orioles any semblance of quality out on the mound. And I'm thinking maybe he gets to the All-Star break, but if he still has an 8+ ERA at that point and hasn't had any better results between now and then, you really do have to wonder if they have to start looking at some other options, even if those other options aren't exactly attractive or all that encouraging.
Clean sheet in the bullpen on Tuesday night against an Indians team that I think we look at them and say, well, they'll probably be playing in October, right? I certainly wouldn't bet $1 against that at this point, despite the struggles of Lindor and guys at the bottom of their rotation. And the Orioles saw the bottom of their rotation. Look, I mean, the wild thing out there is ERA's hovering over 6 right now as well, and the Indians lost that game in another sort of bad start by the worst of their starters, so they've had their hands full as well.
They have, and I think most people agree Cleveland's the class of that division. I mean, the Twins have been a really nice story, although we've seen them fall off, and certainly their run differential is not indicative of a team that's going to be playing.
I don't know if they fell off, dude. The Indians kind of pushed them off over the weekend.
Right, yeah. I mean, the Indians, with the 4-game sweep over the weekend, I mean, that's their division to win. And I know Kansas City's been playing much better, but I'm still not a believer in the Royals, and I still think you look at Dayton Moore there, they're going to be sellers because I think they realize, they're kind of in a position that the Orioles will be in at the very least next year when you're talking about guys with expiring contracts and very clearly coming to an end. So I'd be very surprised, barring a slew of injuries, if the Indians don't win that division and win it pretty convincingly. I don't know if they'll necessarily pull a Houston Astros here before it's all said and done, but I think they should win that division comfortably. Their biggest issue is they haven't played well at home. They've played well on the road, and certainly we saw what they're capable of Monday night. But nice performance from the Orioles bullpen. I mean, I was very surprised in the 7th inning when Richard Blyer gets into some trouble there, and they intentionally walk Santana, bases loaded, 1 out. And I assumed because Buck did not go to Michael Givens there, I thought Givens might have been down for another day. Remember, he threw a career-high 42 pitches on Saturday. So I thought, all right, well, if Givens isn't coming into this spot, then he's probably not available. They bring in Miguel Castro. He strikes out Yan Gomes, and he gets Zimmer to ground out to first. I mean, that's some big-time pitching right there in a 5-5 game. And they come back in the bottom half of the inning, and Jones hits the RBI double to right. But Castro, someone who's got a really impressive arm. He was it wasn't that terribly long ago, a couple years ago. He was entrusted to be a closer. Actually, he's young, but you see the talent. He's only 22 years old. Has a live fastball that you like to see if you're talking about someone back end of the bullpen. And as much as if it were me, I would have gone with Givens in that spot, and then maybe had Castro start a clean inning in the 8th if Givens gets out of it. Buck flat out said he wanted to see what he was made of a little bit. He's done a nice job here overall, and he comes in and gets out of a huge spot. So Does that mean that he's going to be a big piece of this bullpen moving forward? No, but we've said it over and over and over, and even though it looks like Darren O'Day, if the sim game on Wednesday goes well, that he could be activated by the weekend, you're going to need some of these other guys to get some outs for you. It can't just be Brad Brock and Michael Givens. You need.
Yeah, they're going to play the 5th and 6th and 7th inning. The question is what you're going to do about it, right?
Yeah, and it's great to say, on certain nights that you can extend Givens. I mean, yeah, you can do that every once in a while, but that comes with a cost. They did that. They had to do that with Givens on Saturday, and then they didn't have him Sunday and Monday. So, it didn't matter on Monday. About the only thing you could say is, well, if you're not going to be in any close games and you're going to be blown out, then yeah, you'll probably survive with 2 good relievers because it doesn't really matter. But if you're in games like they were Tuesday night, you're going to need some of these, quote, lesser guys to get some meaningful outs from time to time. And it was good to see Miguel Castro able to do that and then turn things over to Givens in the 8th inning. As it turned out, he was available. And then Brad Brock, despite getting into some trouble in the 9th inning, he nails down the save.
Luke, last thing for you before we set sail here on the second half of this series. Gausman and then Miley. And I also, we still have to question Bundy now. I mean, for a month or a month and a half, we're like, all right, when are the rest of these guys going to pick it up? Before that is when is Tillman going to get back in the rotation? Where's Jimenez? Jimenez has been their best starter this month because he went out and actually did it one game on Sunday. Far from me to predict that would happen again in Tampa on Friday. But for now, Gausman goes, and Bundy's going to get pushed around here, right?
Yeah, they're going to take advantage of their next off day as well as the All-Star break to push him back a little bit. They're not going to shut him down. It's nothing that extreme, and frankly, it's something that they were planning already. I mean, this is a kid who is 24 years old, and he's already thrown 92 innings. That's 17 2/3 innings shy of what he pitched last year. Now,
he's also a kid that's 24 that spent most of his career in a trainer's room.
Correct.
Period, right?
As much as Dylan Bundy is so critical to this 2017 club, you do have to think about 2018 and 2019 and 2020 and 2021 with him because you're hoping that he can be that ace for you over the next few years. You're hoping Kevin Gausman straightens out over that time as well, but you have to be thinking a little bit with the future in mind. It doesn't mean he's going to be shut down, although I do think there would be an interesting conversation if this team's 15 games out in August, whether you shut him down for the season. But what they're going to do after the off day, he's going to kind of go to the back of the rotation, so he'll get a few extra days there. He'll pitch once more then before the All-Star break, and that should be, I think, the Saturday before the break, if I'm mistaken, just off the top of my head. And then once they come back from the All-Star break, he'll slot into the number 5 spot, and that will give him some extended time off. It's essentially, it'll come down to skipping him without truly skipping him, for lack of a better way to put it. So I think it's something that they had planned to do all along. As much as he was not good on Monday night, the velocity has actually been a little bit better in the month of June. But I think you've seen the command suffer a little bit. And I really do wonder, as much as you really like his moxie, you really like the head that he has on his shoulders, some of that toughness he has that, frankly, I think just looking at it, just as an observer, you wish Kevin Gausman had a little bit more of that. I don't want to say Kevin Gausman isn't mentally tough, but Bundy seems a little more unshaken on the hill, even when he's not pitching all that well, whereas I think Gausman, that's not always the case with him. So, Bundy, you got to take care of that arm. You want to have him for the whole season if they're going to be in contention, which I know is a big question right now, but they had planned to do this all along, so they're going to push him back a little bit here, take advantage of the next off day, which, keep in mind, they haven't had an off day in a while, so they're going to take advantage of that to get him some extra rest, and then they'll maneuver around the All-Star break. So good to see that, because I know that was something, looking at the numbers the other day, just looking at his season, besides seeing the ERA climb a little bit higher than you'd like, and certainly we saw him pitching to a 2.5 ERA through the first couple months of the season. You need to get him rest. You need to keep him right, because he's too important to the future of this team, regardless of him being the only pitcher that they can trust right now. You can't run him into the ground when he's just 24 and has the injury history that you mentioned.
Well, and also we'll see Carrasco and Clevenger. Then the Orioles off to Tampa this weekend where the rotation will be shaken up. We're going to see Jimenez again, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's going to be in the rotation at least for the time being.
I knew it. I told you that a month ago. They go back to him.
And it comes down to this, and we talked about this at the time, and there was that Saturday night game when Buck used him in the 8th inning, and fans went nuts, and I understood the fan frustration there. And
well, it was the Red Sox, too. It wasn't like a throwaway game.
Right.
You know?
Oh, sure. But we said it at the time, you can't have someone in your bullpen, and this is what's going to be the issue if Chris Tillman has to go to the bullpen as well, because you can't send him to the minor leagues. But you can't have someone in the bullpen who cannot be optioned to the minor leagues and then can't pitch in any even medium leverage situations. If it's strictly a mop-up guy, you can't just hide that pitcher in the bullpen if he has to.
Especially if you're doing mop-up 4 days a week. I mean, literally. I mean, you might have one mop-up in you, but to your point, there's going to come extra innings. There's going to come a tight game. There's going to come an 8th inning situation when you're depleted that you're going to need. You need your full complement of arms. You just do.
Yeah. So the thought process there was, if Jimenez can only pitch every 5 days anyway, not getting good starts from anyone else really other than Dylan Bundy, put him back in the rotation. Alec Asher has pitched well in relief as much as it was, at best a mixed bag as a starter. I mean, he had a couple starts where he was good and a couple starts where he was horrendous. So what does that add up to?
Horrendous is relative. I would let him start. You know what I mean? Like I think horrendous when you're looking at what Jimenez has been and what Tillman has been and what Gausman has been, and it's relative. His name's Asher, so he's not starting, but I've seen more signs of life with him, at least to get you to the 5th inning. I don't think he's ever going to get you to the 8th, but I think the first 90 pitches from him are just as good as the first 90 pitches I've seen from the rest of these guys.
That's true, but what they do like about Asher, he has shown a little bit more of an ability to pitch out of the bullpen, and meaning he could throw 40 pitches and then maybe come back a couple days later.
It's also about warming up. I mean, putting Kevin Gausman in the bullpen, that didn't work, and it probably won't work, right? Some guys have that rubber band arm, And
yeah, I mean, and Gausman actually, compared to Jimenez, for example, actually showed an aptitude to do it. It just comes down to Jimenez wasn't able to give them length other than every 5th day. It was kind of like having a starting pitcher in the bullpen. So if he can't bounce back and give you multiple outings over a 5 or 6 day period, if he can't pitch at least twice for you, then how valuable is that? Whereas Asher, pitched really well out of the bullpen in May, and part of it has to do with the fact that O'Day went on the DL, and they've already been missing Britton. And by the way, Britton, scoreless inning at Aberdeen on Tuesday night. Reports were threw the ball well.
I saw that a lot. Several of my Facebook friends went up there for that. Ryan Ripken, all that good stuff.
That was actually their season opener. It got rained out on Monday night.
Mr. Angelos' worst nightmare: people going to games in Aberdeen instead of downtown.
But
that's Chapter 7 of the Peter Principles, is what that's going to be.
So. But was good. All indications are movement was much better. Remember when he came back, through his couple rehab stints and then those 2 outings he had in Boston, even before the setback with the strain in his forearm, the movement wasn't there on the sinker. So I know he was pleased with the movement there. I think next stop for him, he's going to have a couple outings at Delmarva. They did place him on the 60-day DL because they wanted to make a 40-man roster spot for Craig Gentry. They sent David Washington back to Norfolk. Gentry now coming off the bench for the Orioles.
And everyone's asking, who's David Washington? Right,
exactly.
Yeah.
Was not impressive. That's all I know from seeing him. But what all that means for Britton, it was a procedural thing. They weren't planning on activating him before July anyway. He's eligible July 4th. All we know now is not going to be back before July 4th, but the way that they had mapped out his rehab schedule, he wasn't going to be back before then anyway. So far so good with Zach Britton. You continue to cross your fingers that forearm muscle strain that he had doesn't creep back. They've taken it very slow with him. That much is obvious. As much as that 45 to 60 day prognosis that was initially leaked out there, and I know he said that he thought that was very conservative at the time. Turned out that's what it ended up being, and you hope that does the trick, because whether it's a matter of the Orioles getting back into, getting themselves situated and being in contention, at least for a wild card, or if it's a case of they fall out of it and a healthy Zach Britton is a tradable piece, an injured Zach Britton is not a tradable piece. So we'll see how that plays out, but good to see that, and good to see, like I said, good to see the bullpen, some unlikely names in there pitching in some big spots for the Orioles on Tuesday night. And, hey, they got to win despite extending the streak to 17.
He is Luke Jones. Baltimore Luke, he will be on the scene for all things Gosman. We will be together out on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, anywhere the internet is served. And, of course, if there's any breaking news, you'll get that first on the WNST text service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis will be here on Thursday, as he is every Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home with the SSV on WNST. Voice is a little scratchy. Bono did that to me. If not him, it was the Edge or Mullen or Clayton. One of these guys threw me around on Tuesday night, but I will be back on the beat watching Oriole baseball as well all week long. The morning newspaper ships to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness, and a huge shout out to Planet Fitness. Every time I mention Planet Fitness now, I'm going to thank the folks at Landover for saving my butt and getting me out of Raljon on Tuesday night. So, viva la Planet Fitness and planetfitness.com. We are very appreciative of their partnership, as well as giving me parking at a reasonable price with a reasonable getaway so I could be home by midnight to do sports radio for you. Don't forget, the Peter Principle's there for you as well. Chapter 6 launched earlier this week. If you want to learn anything about Davey Johnson or Mike Messina or Peter Angelos or Pat Gillick, you may want to read the facts, just the facts. It's almost like the dragnet of Oriole reporting. So check it out. It is the Peter Principles, Chapter 6, now up on the website. I am Nestor. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. And we are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.